The sound was not an explosion, nor was it the roar of a collapsing star. It was a lock clicking shut, a sound so absolute, so final, that it vibrated in the marrow of Son Goku's bones. He stood paralyzed, his orange gi torn and fluttering in a wind that no longer existed, staring at the dimensional rift sealing before his eyes. The Grand Priest hovered on the other side, his face a mask of terrifying indifference, his halo glowing with the cold light of judgment. Beside Goku, Vados, the Angel of Universe 6, usually composed, usually untouchable, fell to her knees, her staff clattering against the white, sterile floor of the primal void. "Father, why?" she whispered, her voice cracking, a sound that felt alien coming from an immortal throat. The Grand Priest did not answer. He merely extended a hand, and the rift stitched itself closed, erasing the swirling colors of the multiverse, erasing the stars, erasing time itself. The light vanished. The warmth of existence was severed. They were left in a whiteness more profound than the hyperbolic time chamber, a prison outside of the timeline where seconds stretched into eons. Goku reached out, his hand trembling, his ki flaring into a desperate Super Saiyan blue roar that shattered the silence but failed to scratch the wall of their reality. They were not just trapped, they were forgotten, and in this white hell, 5,000 years were about to begin. Before the centuries begin to bleed into one another and the timeline fractures under the weight of this forbidden union, bind your spirit to this chronicle, engage with this legend now, so that when the seal breaks, you are ready to witness what lies beyond the power of Zeno. The first sound to die was the echo. When the dimensional rift stitched itself shut, sealing the Grand Priest's judgment into reality, Goku screamed. It was a roar of pure, primal denial, a Super Saiyan blue flare that should have shattered moons and shaken the foundations of hell. But here, in the primal void, the sound simply ceased. It did not travel. It fell dead from his lips, swallowed by a whiteness so absolute it felt like a physical weight. The golden-blue aura that erupted from his skin didn't illuminate anything because there was nothing to light up. There was no floor, no sky, no horizon, only an infinite, sterile blankness that stretched into forever. Goku fell to his knees, panting, his sweat evaporating instantly into the dry, static air. He clawed at the nothingness, his fingers digging into space that felt like smooth, cold glass. "Vados!" he shouted, turning to the only other point of existence in the endless white. "Open it! You have your staff, undo this." Vados stood 10 paces away, though distance felt illusory here. The angel, usually draped in an armor of unshakable calm, looked terrifyingly mortal. Her staff, the conduit of her divine authority, lay dull and gray in her hand, the floating gem atop it extinguished. She looked at Goku, her violet eyes wide, reflecting the terror of a creature who had never known helplessness. "I cannot," she whispered, the words barely carrying across the gap between them. The connection, the link to the angels, to the High Priest, it is gone. It is all gone, Son Goku. We are not just displaced, we have been excised. For the first time in his life, Goku felt a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the chill of absolute isolation. He was a warrior defined by his context, by the enemies he fought, the friends he protected, the limits he broke. But here, there were no enemies. There were no limits because there was no structure. There was only the white. The first week was a blur of frantic, useless violence. Goku raged against the prison. He transformed into every state he knew God. Blue, Kaioken throwing ki blasts that flew for eternity without ever hitting a target, merely fading into tiny sparks in the distance. He flew in one direction for what felt like days, pushing his speed to the speed of light, only to stop and realize that without landmarks, movement was indistinguishable from stillness. He had gone nowhere. Vados did not move. She sat in a meditative lotus position, her staff across her lap, her eyes closed. She was trying to conserve the divine energy that no longer replenished itself. For an angel, who exists in a state of perpetual flow with the cosmos, this stagnation was a kind of suffocation. She was a lung trying to breathe in a vacuum. Then came the first year, then the 10th. The concept of time began to liquefy. Without a sun to rise or set, without the biological need for sleep sustained only by the strange, ambient pressure of the void that kept their bodies in stasis, the rhythm of life collapsed. Goku sat across from Vados, his gi tattered not by battle, but by the friction of his own restlessness. He stared at his hands. The calluses from a lifetime of martial arts were beginning to soften. "I can't hear them anymore," Goku said softly, breaking a silence that had lasted for 3 months. Vados opened one eye. Her skin, usually glowing with an ethereal sheen, looked pale, solid. "Hear whom, son Goku? Gohan, Goten, Chi-Chi, Vegeta." Goku rubbed his face, his voice trembling. "I used to be able to close my eyes and feel their ki. Even across the universe, I could feel the hum of them, like a song I knew by heart. But now, it's just static. I'm forgetting the sound of their voices, Vados. I'm forgetting what the sky looks like." Vados looked at him, and for the first time, the mask of the attendant fell away entirely. There was no "my lord," no playful teasing. There was only a shared, crushing grief. "This is the punishment," she said, her voice hollow. "The Grand Priest did not send us here to die. Death is a release. He sent us here to fade, to become rust, to let the eternity of this place sand down the sharp edges of who we are until we are smooth, round, and empty." Goku clenched his fist, the knuckles cracking loud in the stillness. "I won't fade," he growled, though the fire in his eyes was dimmer than before. "I'm a Saiyan. We survive. We adapt." "Adapt to what?" Vados asked, a cruel edge of despair in her tone. "There is nothing here to struggle against, Goku. A Saiyan grows stronger by breaking walls. What will you do when there are no walls left?" Goku looked at her, and then, slowly, he stood up. He walked over to where she sat and sat down beside her, close enough that the heat of his mortal body radiated against her cold, celestial skin. "Then I'll fight the nothing," Goku said, staring into the white abyss. "And you're going to help me, because if we stop moving, if we stop talking, then he wins, and I don't lose." But as the first century began to creep over them like a slow-moving glacier, Goku realized that fighting the nothing was the hardest battle he had ever fought. The silence didn't punch back. It just waited. It waited for him to scream, to cry, to sleep, and eventually, it waited for him to forget why he was fighting at all. The rust had begun to settle on the diamond of his will. 500 years is enough time for a mountain to be ground down to a pebble by the wind. In the primal void, there was no wind, only the silent, grinding pressure of existence without purpose. Goku had stopped screaming centuries ago. He had stopped trying to blast the walls. The Saiyan biology, built for conflict, had turned inward. Without an enemy to destroy, his body had begun to cannibalize its own restlessness. His hair had grown wild and long, a mane of obsidian that flowed down his back, unkempt and primitive. The orange gi was gone, disintegrated by time and friction, replaced by nothing but the hardened, scarred landscape of his own skin. He sat cross-legged, floating a few inches above the white floor, his breathing so slow it was almost imperceptible. 1 breath every hour. He was meditating not for power, but for retention. He was trying to keep the memories from leaking out of his ears. Pan's laugh, the smell of frying bacon, the weight of the 4-star ball. He repeated these things like a mantra, but they were becoming abstract concepts, words without pictures. "Stand up," Son Goku." The voice cut through his trance. Vados stood over him. She, too, had changed. The pristine robes of the attendant were tattered, tied together in knots to maintain modesty. Her halo was gone, dissipated into the void when her connection to the Grand Priest was severed. Without the divine light, she looked startlingly, beautifully severe. Her pale blue skin seemed less like clouds and more like ice. Goku opened his eyes. They were darker now, the naive sparkle replaced by the deep, abyssal calm of a predator that has waited too long. "Why?" he rasped. His voice was like grinding stones. He hadn't used it in a decade. "Because you are fading," Vados said, her voice sharp, devoid of her old playful lilt. "Your ki is retracting into your core. If you go any deeper, you will enter a sleep from which you will never wake. And I—" She hesitated, her hand tightening on the dead gray shaft of her staff. "I cannot be alone here, Goku. I cannot endure the silence without the sound of your struggle." Goku looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in ages. He saw the desperation she tried to hide behind her angelic stoicism. She was an immortal being designed to serve, to guide, to observe. Without a purpose, she was hollowing out faster than he was. He stood up. The movement caused his joints to pop, the sound like gunshots in the quiet. "No ki," Goku said, shifting into a stance. "Just us." "Just us," she agreed. They clashed. It was not the earth-shaking combat of the Tournament of Power. There were no shockwaves that cracked the universe, no light shows of blue or ultra instinct. It was raw, brutal, and intimate. Fist met palm, shin met forearm, the sounds of wet impacts creating a rhythm in the silence. They moved with the grace of dancers who had rehearsed this for centuries. For hours, they fought. Sweat flew from Goku's body, splashing onto Vados' face, hot and salty. It was the only warmth in the entire dimension. Vados moved with fluidity, but Goku forced her to be jagged, to react, to grunt with effort. He was forcing her to feel alive. In a sudden blur of motion, Goku slipped past her guard, tackling her. They crashed onto the unseen floor, rolling, grappling, until Goku pinned her down, his forearm against her throat, her legs locked around his waist to restrain him. They froze there, chests heaving, hearts hammering against each other's ribs. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was charged. Goku looked down at her. His face was inches from hers. In her violet eyes, he saw his own reflection, wild, ancient, and terrified. "I forgot her face," Goku whispered, the confession tearing out of him. Tears, hot and unfamiliar, welled in his eyes and dropped onto Vados' cheek. "Chi-Chi, I tried to see her just now, but she's gone. It's just a gray blur. I'm losing them, Vados. I'm losing everything that made me Goku." Vados stared up at him. She felt the heat of his grief, the immense, crushing weight of his mortality struggling against the infinite. An angel is not supposed to feel attachment. An angel is not supposed to interfere. But the laws of the Grand Priest did not exist here. Slowly, tentatively, she reached up. Her cool fingers touched the rough stubble on his jaw, tracing the line of a scar he had gotten from Jiren a lifetime ago. "You are not losing everything," Vados whispered, her voice trembling with a new, terrifying emotion. "You are shedding the past to survive the present. You are not Goku the Earthling anymore. You are not Goku the Saiyan." She pulled him closer, her forehead resting against his. The barrier between God and mortal, between guide and student, shattered under the weight of 500 years of solitude. "You are the only thing that is real," she breathed. "You are my anchor. If you forget them, then I will remember them for you, but you must stay here, with me." Goku let out a shuddering breath, his forehead pressing into hers. The despair didn't vanish. But for the first time in half a millennium, he didn't feel like he was falling. He felt gravity. He felt her. In the white hell of the primal void, the rust stopped spreading. The diamond began to harden. And in the space between their heartbeats, the first spark of a new universe was struck. Time did not pass in the primal void. It accumulated, like dust on a forgotten shelf. By the second millennium, the concept of Goku and Vados had dissolved. Names were useful only when there were others to distinguish oneself from. Here, there was only the man and the angel, the two who were one. They had built a home not out of wood or stone, but out of routine and energy. They meditated back to back, their auras merging into a twilight haze of violet and silver. Goku's ki, once a raging torrent of golden fire, had cooled. It had become dense, heavy, and quiet like the core of a star that had stopped burning but refused to die. Vados, in turn, had lost her transparency. The absolute neutrality of the angel, the state of being that allowed them to dodge automatically and exist without bias, had been infected by Saiyan passion. She had learned to want, she had learned to fear, she had learned to love. And in that shared space, a heresy was born. The Grand Priest's law was absolute. Angels guide, gods destroy, mortals create. The lines were drawn in the fabric of the multiverse to prevent chaos. Angels were sterile observers, beings of static perfection. They were not meant to create life, for to create life is to introduce unpredictability into the system. But the Grand Priest had locked them in a box where his laws could not see them. It happened during what would have been the 3000th year, though they had stopped counting centuries ago. They were resting after a bout of sparring that had lasted for days. Goku lay on the invisible floor, his head resting on Vados' lap. Her hand, no longer cool but warm with shared vitality, stroked the long, coarse mane of his hair. "Do you feel it?" Goku murmured, his eyes closed. "Feel what?" Vados asked softly. "The limit," Goku said. "I've hit it. My body. It can't hold any more power. I've refined my ki, condensed it, polished it. But I'm just a cup, Vados. A cup can't hold the ocean. I'm stuck." Vados looked down at him. She saw the tragedy of the Saiyan race written in his scars. They were creatures of infinite potential, trapped in finite vessels. He wanted to evolve, to ascend, but biology was a cage. "Perhaps," Vados whispered, her voice sounding strange even to her own ears, "evolution does not always happen within oneself. Sometimes it happens between." She leaned down. The kiss was not human, nor was it divine. It was a collision of fundamental forces. It was the meeting of the unmovable object angel and the unstoppable force Saiyan. In that moment, the white void recoiled. The sterility of the dimension fractured. Light, real, blinding, prismatic light exploded from their joined silhouettes. It was not just an act of love, it was an act of rebellion. They were two survivors clinging to each other in the dark, and in their desperate need to leave a mark on the nothingness, they unlocked a biological door that nature had kept double-locked since the beginning of time. Biology fused with divinity. The rage of the Uzuru mixed with the calm of ultra instinct. The mortal desire to survive merged with the immortal indifference to time. When they pulled apart, the air around them was singing. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the floor, a sound like a heavy bell struck deep underwater. Goku sat up, his hand going to his chest, his eyes wide. What was that energy? It didn't come from me. And it didn't come from you." Vados stared at her own hands. They were trembling. For 3,000 years, her internal energy signature had been a perfect, flat line, unchanging, eternal. Now, there was a spike, a ripple, a second pulse. She looked at Goku, terror and wonder warring in her violet eyes. "We have done something forbidden, Son Goku," she whispered, her hands moving instinctively to her abdomen. "We have created a variable, Part 2. The Heartbeat of the Void. The pregnancy of an angel is not a matter of biology, but of cosmology. Vados did not swell with fluid and flesh in the way a human woman might. Instead, she began to glow. A concentration of energy formed within her, a singularity of such density that the space around her began to warp. For the next 9 months, or what felt like 9 months in the fluid time of the void, Goku did not leave her side. The warrior who had once been criticized for being an absent father, for choosing training over family, now sat motionless for weeks at a time, watching the miracle unfold. He could feel the ki of the unborn child. It was terrifying. It wasn't the gentle hum of Gohan or the playful spark of Goten. This energy felt like gravity. It felt heavy. When Goku placed his hand near Vados, he could feel his own aura being pulled toward her, sucked in by the vacuum of the life growing inside. "He is eating the ambient energy," Vados noted one day. Her voice strained. She looked exhausted, her immortality taxed to its limit. "He is draining the void itself, to build his body." "Is he hurting you?" Goku asked, his voice low and dangerous. He was ready to fight a god, a universe, or even the child itself if it meant saving her. "No," Vados smiled weakly, a look of profound peace softening her sharp features. "He is anchoring me. I told you once that you were my anchor. Now, he is the weight that keeps us both from drifting away." The birth, when it came, was silent. There were no doctors, no towels, no hot water. There was only the white hell and the two ancient souls huddled together. Vados let out a sharp gasp, her back arching as the singularity within her reached critical mass. The light flared a blinding, gold and silver radiance that turned the white void into a kaleidoscope of colors they hadn't seen in millennia. Crimson, cerulean, emerald, obsidian. The child did not cry. When the light faded, Vados held a small bundle in her arms. The boy was pale, his skin the color of moonlight on snow. He had a tail, wrapped tightly around his waist, but unlike a Saiyan's brown fur, this tail was pure, shimmering white. His hair was black like Goku's, but it defied gravity, floating as if he were underwater. Goku leaned in, his heart hammering against his ribs like a war drum. He reached out a scarred finger. The infant opened his eyes. They were not black like a Saiyan's. They were not violet like an angel's. One eye was the deep, endless gray of the void itself. The other was a piercing, radiant gold, the color of the Super Saiyan. The baby looked at Goku's finger. He didn't grab it, he simply looked at it, and the air around Goku's finger distorted, twisting and bending. "He didn't cry," Goku whispered, unsettled. "Why didn't he cry?" "Because he is not in pain," Vados said, looking down at her son with a mixture of adoration and fear. "And he is not afraid. He is born of this place, Goku. The void is not his prison. It is his cradle." She looked up at Goku. "He is the union of the instinct that acts without thought, and the will that refuses to yield. He is the end of the hierarchy." "Sorrel," Goku said, the name coming to him from a memory of a plant he had once seen on Earth, something that grew stubbornly in the cracks of rocks where nothing else could survive. "His name is Sorrel." As if accepting the title, the baby finally moved. He uncurled his white tail and wrapped it around Goku's wrist. A shockwave, small but undeniable, rippled out from the contact, shaking the infinite floor for miles. The silence of the primal void was broken. There was a third heartbeat now, and it beat with the rhythm of a clock counting down to the end of the Grand Priest's reign. A child raised under a yellow sun learns warmth. A child raised under a red sun learns gravity. Sorrel was raised under no sun, in a world of absolute zero, and so he learned the texture of silence. By the time the boy looked to be 10 years old, though chronologically 1,000 years had bled into the white floor, He was a creature of unsettling quiet. He did not run. He did not play. He sat. He watched the nothingness with his mismatched eyes, one gray, one golden, and he waited for it to speak back. Goku, desperate to instill some semblance of Saiyan heritage in his son, tried to teach him the language of violence. "Watch me, Sorrel," Goku said, his voice raspy with age. He stood 100 yards away, settling into the turtle hermit stance. "You have to pull the energy from deep inside. Don't let it leak, squeeze it," Goku roared, his hair flashing silver into ultra instinct. A massive Kamehameha erupted from his palms, a blue dragon of energy that screamed across the void, tearing a trench of light through the darkness before fading into the infinite distance. "See?" Goku grinned, panting slightly. "That's ki. That's life. Now you try." Sorrel stood up. He was wearing clothes woven from the materialized ki of his parents, a strange, shifting fabric of orange and violet. He looked at his hands. He didn't cup them at his hip. He didn't bend his knees. He simply held up one pale index finger. He didn't gather energy. He didn't scream. He simply pinched. Sorrel pinched the air in front of him as if he were catching a fly, and then he twisted his wrist. Crack! The sound was louder than Goku's energy wave. It was the sound of a bone breaking, but the bone was the universe itself. A black jagged line appeared in the air where Sorrel had twisted. It wasn't energy, it was the absence of it. A dimensional tear. "I don't need to push it," Sorrel said, his voice soft, melodic, and terrifyingly calm. "The world is soft, Father. If you press it, it bends. If you pull it, it breaks." Goku dropped his stance, the silver fading from his hair. He looked at the black crack floating in the air, a scar on the perfect white prison. It shouldn't be possible. Even Broly, even Jiren, even the Omni King needed to exert force to break reality. Sorrel had done it with a gesture, as casually as folding paper. Vados stepped forward, her face pale. She placed her hand over the crack, using her angelic restoration powers to stitch the wound in reality closed. It took her effort. She was sweating. "Sorrel," Vados said, her tone sharp, "you must not damage the container. We exist inside this shell. If you break it before you are ready, the outside pressure will crush you." Sorrel looked at her with that golden eye, the one that burned with an ancient, celestial intelligence. "There is an outside?" The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. "Yes," Goku said, walking closer, placing a heavy hand on his son's shoulder. "A place full of stars, billions of them, hotter than fire, brighter than you can imagine, and people, strong people, stars." Sorrel tested the word. He had never seen a star. He had only seen the fading memories in his father's mind during their telepathic links. "Why are we here then? If the stars are there?" "Because," Vados said quietly, "we were judged dangerous." Sorrel looked at his hands again, hands that could fold space like origami. A small, cold smile touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a predator realizing the cage door was made of wood, and he was made of fire. "Then the judgment was correct," Sorrel whispered. Part 2. The Sparring of Dimensions. Another 1,000 years passed. The boy became a man. Sorrel was no longer a child. He was tall, built with the lean, deceptive musculature of a swimmer rather than the bulk of a brawler. His hair was long like Goku's, a wild black mane, but it floated constantly, suspended by his own gravity. His white tail flicked lazily behind him, a limb with a mind of its own. The dynamic of the prison had shifted. It was no longer two parents raising a child. It was three gods sharing a cage that was becoming too small. "Again!" Goku shouted. Goku was in true Ultra Instinct, now the state where emotions were allowed to fuel the body's reflexive movement. He was a blur of silver and rage, moving faster than light, striking with the weight of a collapsing galaxy. He threw a punch aimed squarely at Sorrel's jaw. It should have connected. It was a strike that had floored Jiren. But Sorrel didn't dodge. He didn't block. In the nanosecond before impact, the distance between Goku's fist and Sorrel's face expanded. Goku felt it. The space stretched. 1 inch became a mile. His fist punched through empty air, momentum carrying him forward, stumbling. He wasn't missing. The destination was moving away from him. Sorrel stood perfectly still, his arms crossed. "You are fighting distance, father. You cannot punch math." Goku spun around, teeth gritted. "Stop using tricks. Fight me." "This is not a trick," Sorrel replied coolly. "This is authority. You borrow power from your body. Mother borrows power from the angels. I do not borrow. I impose." Sorrel uncrossed his arms. "Now, my turn." He looked at Goku. He didn't move a muscle. He simply willed it. Gravity, inverted. Goku was slammed upward, as if the ceiling had suddenly become the floor. He crashed into nothingness, pinned by a crushing weight that came from nowhere. His bones groaned under the pressure 10,000 times Earth's gravity? No, 1,000,000. Kaioken. Goku roared, red fire exploding around him to push back the invisible hand. He forced himself upright, veins bulging in his forehead. "Is that all you got?" Vados watched from the sidelines, her heart aching with a mix of pride and terror. She saw what Goku refused to see. Goku was a warrior who broke limits. Sorrel was a being who set them. Sorrel looked at his father, struggling against the crushing weight. There was no malice in his eyes, only a scientific curiosity. "You are strong, father," Sorrel said. "But you are linear. You move from point A to point B. You grow from level 1 to level 2. Sorrel raised a hand, and the gravity vanished instantly. Goku dropped, landing on his feet, panting heavily. "I am not linear," Sorrel continued, walking toward him. The white floor rippled beneath his feet like water. "I am the circle. I am the point where the start meets the end. You told me the Grand Priest locked us here to fade, to rust." Sorrel stopped inches from Goku. He was taller than his father now. He looked down, his gray eye swirling like a nebula, his golden eye burning like a supernova. "He did not lock us in," Sorrel whispered. "He locked himself out." Goku looked up at his son. For 5,000 years, Goku had believed he was the protector. He was the shield that stood between his family and the darkness. But looking at the entity standing before him, this fusion of Saiyan drive and angelic law, Goku realized the truth. He wasn't raising a warrior. He was raising a usurper. "Sorrel," Vados spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. She stepped between them. "Your father is tired. Enough." Sorrel's gaze shifted to his mother. For a second, the air crackled with a terrifying possibility that he would not listen, that he had outgrown obedience. But then, the coldness receded, the god vanished, and the sun returned. "Yes, mother," Sorrel bowed slightly. But as he turned to walk away, to meditate in the far reaches of the white hell, Goku saw it. He saw the way the void shivered as Sorrel passed through it. The reality of this dimension was wearing thin. It was fraying at the seams, unable to contain the density of Sorrel's existence. Goku looked at Vados. She met his gaze. "He's going to break it," Goku whispered. "Soon." "No," Vados corrected him, her eyes fixed on the retreating back of their son. "He is not going to break it. He is going to open it. And when he does, heaven help whoever is standing on the other side." Outside the prison, time flowed like a river, swift, linear, and indifferent. In the Omniverse, only 5 days had passed since the Grand Priest had severed the timeline. The erasure of Goku and Vados had been a surgically precise operation, a removal of a cancerous variable before it could metastasize. The tournament of power had concluded. The universes were safe. The hierarchy was restored. The Grand Priest stood on the balcony of Zeno's palace, overlooking the swirling nebulae of the multiverse. He held a teacup in his small, pale hand. The tea was still hot. To him, the Goku problem was a file closed, a book burned, and the ashes scattered. Then, the tea rippled. It was microscopic, a concentric circle vibrating on the surface of the green liquid. But in a place of absolute perfection, where not even an atom moved without the Grand Priest's permission, a ripple was a scream. The Grand Priest narrowed his eyes. He looked up, not at the stars, but behind them. He looked at the fabric of the reality he maintained. "Strange," he murmured, his voice echoing in the vast, empty colonnade. "What is strange, Daishinkan?" The squeaky, dual voices of the two Zenos drifted from the throne room behind him. They were playing a game of planetary marbles, flicking galaxies across a board. "Nothing, your majesties," the Grand Priest replied, though his grip on the teacup tightened until the ceramic groaned. "Just a draft, a ghost of a memory." He was lying. It wasn't a draft, it was pressure. Deep in the sub-layer of existence, in the dimension he had sealed shut with the highest lock in creation, something was pushing back. It wasn't the erratic banging of a desperate prisoner trying to break out. It was the steady, expanding growth of a root system shattering a concrete pot. The dimension wasn't being attacked. It was being outgrown. Inside the primal void, the white hell was dying. The sterile, infinite brightness that had defined their world for 5,000 years was turning gray. The floor, once smooth and indestructible, was covered in spiderweb fractures. The air tasted of ozone and burning metal. Goku stood near the center of their territory, watching the decay. He looked ancient. His beard was long and streaked with gray. His gi was a patchwork of energy-woven fabric, and his eyes held the heavy, weary wisdom of a mountain that has weathered too many storms. "It's time," Goku said. His voice was no longer a shout. It was a rumble, deep and resonant. Sorrel stood a few paces away. He was fully formed, now a being of breathtaking, terrifying symmetry. He wore a tunic of dark gray and deep violet, woven by Vados, that seemed to absorb the fading light of the dimension. His white tail swayed behind him with hypnotic rhythm. "Tell me about the gatekeeper," Sorrel said. He was looking at a specific point in the fractured sky, a point that looked empty to Goku, but to Sorrel it was clearly a weak weld in the steel of reality. "The Grand Priest," Vados answered, stepping up beside her son. She looked tired. Maintaining the life support for three beings in a collapsing dimension had drained her. Her skin was almost translucent. "He is the father of all angels. He is the law. His power is not like yours, Sorrel. He does not fight. He decides. If he decides you are motionless, you stop. If he decides you are non-existent, you fade." Sorrel tilted his head. The golden eye narrowed, the gray eye widened. "He decides? Based on what authority?" "Based on the fact that he wrote the rules," Goku said, crossing his arms. "And Zeno, the little guy, he can erase everything. Just a wave of his hand. Poof, no fight, no defense. Just gone." Goku walked up to his son. He placed a hand on Sorrel's chest. He could feel the heartbeat underneath, slow, heavy, like the ticking of a doomsday clock. "Listen to me, Sorrel. Outside, they don't fight like we do. They don't spar. They erase. If we go out there, we are declaring war on the concept of order itself. Are you ready for that?" Sorrel looked down at his father's hand. He covered it with his own. "You speak of them as if they own the physics of the world," Sorrel said softly. "They wrote the rules, father, but they did not write me." He turned to the crack in the sky. "I am the story that was written in the margins," Sorrel whispered. "I am the ink that bled through the page. Let us see if the Grand Priest can erase what he cannot comprehend." Part 2. The Collapse of the White Cage. The end of the 5,000-year exile did not begin with a bang. It began with a sound like tearing silk. Sorrel floated upward. He didn't use ki to fly. He simply adjusted his position relative to the universe, deciding that up was where he needed to be. He stopped in front of the invisible barrier that separated the primal void from the world of void. Goku and Vados floated behind him, flanking him like ancient guardians. They powered up. Goku didn't flare into blue or UI. He simply let his base power saturate his body, a dense, invisible armor of 5 millennia of refinement. Vados summoned her staff. Though the gem was dead, she held it like a spear. "Be careful, Sorrel," Vados warned. "The recoil of breaking a dimensional seal can atomize a mortal body." "I am not mortal," Sorrel replied, not looking back. "And I am not breaking it." He raised his hands. His fingers were long, pale, and elegant. He inserted them into the invisible fracture he had been staring at for centuries. He didn't punch, he didn't blast, he pried. Sorrel pulled his hands apart. The reality screamed. A high-pitched, oscillating whine tortured their ears as the laws of physics shrieked in protest. The white sky turned black. Bolts of red lightning, the color of rejected reality, arced from Sorrel's fingers, striking his body. He didn't flinch. He absorbed the lightning, his skin glowing with a faint, iridescent sheen. Hez. Undoing the stitching, Goku realized, watching in awe. Hez, untying the knot. Outside, in the palace of Zeno, the teacup in the Grand Priest's hand exploded. The Grand Priest stumbled forward, gripping the railing of the balcony. His eyes, usually half-lidded and bored, snapped wide open. The pressure wasn't just a ripple anymore. It was a tsunami. "Impossible," the Grand Priest hissed. "The seal is absolute. No ki can penetrate it." But it wasn't ki. Inside the void, Sorrel twisted his wrists. The hole in the sky tore open. For the first time in 5,000 years, color flooded in. The deep, rich purple of the world of void's nebula, the sparkling dust of distant stars. The sensory overload was staggering. Goku gasped. The fresh air that hadn't been recycled for millennia filling his lungs. It tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. But with the air came the attention. Through the tear, a beam of blinding white light shot down the Grand Priest's judgment. It was an erasure beam, a concentrated decree of destruction meant to vaporize whatever was trying to escape. "Father!" Vados screamed. Goku moved to intercept, but Sorrel was faster. Sorrel didn't block the beam. He caught it. The erasure energy slammed into Sorrel's palm. It hissed, struggling to consume him, trying to delete his existence. But Sorrel's hand didn't fade. Instead, the white energy turned gray, then black, then it crumbled into dust, drifting harmlessly away in the wind. Sorrel looked at the dust of the destroyed attack. He looked through the hole, staring directly into the eyes of the Grand Priest, who was watching from across the multiverse through his divine sight. "You sent us a letter," Sorrel spoke, his voice amplified by the tearing dimensions, booming across the cosmos like thunder. "I have read it, and I refuse the terms." With a final, violent motion, Sorrel ripped his hands apart. The sky shattered. The primal void collapsed instantly, folding in on itself like a crushed can. Goku, Vados, and Sorrel were ejected into the real world. They materialized not in the palace, but in the center of the Tournament of Power arena, which had been left as a floating monument in the world of void. The silence of the arena was broken by the arrival of 3 gods. Goku landed heavily, his boots cracking the Kachin floor. He took a deep breath, his eyes adjusting to the dim, purple light. He looked at his hands. They were shaking not from fear, but from the rush of connection. He could feel it again. The universe. The hum of life. "We're back," Goku rasped, a grin splitting his bearded face. Vados landed gracefully beside him, her staff suddenly flaring to life, the gem glowing bright violet as it reconnected with the angelic network. She stood taller, her power rushing back, but her eyes remained cold, fixed on the sky. Sorrel did not land. He hovered 10 feet in the air, his mismatching eyes scanning the horizon. He looked at the stars, the billions of burning suns he had been promised. "So this is the cage you call a universe," Sorrel said, his voice echoing with disappointment. "It feels fragile." High above them, space distorted, the Grand Priest appeared, flanked by 4 of his strongest angels. His face was no longer calm. It was the face of an executioner who had missed his stroke. "Son Goku Vados," the Grand Priest's voice rolled over the arena, heavy with divine pressure, and the abomination. Goku stepped forward, shielding his son and his wife. His aura flared, not the frantic flickering of blue, but a solid, roaring column of silver-white energy. "He has a name," Goku growled, the sound vibrating the entire arena. "And you're going to learn it." The Grand Priest did not shout. He did not scream. He simply lowered his hand. "Execute." It was a command that had ended civilizations, silenced pantheons, and rebooted timelines. At his word, the 4 angels flanking him, Corn, Cuss, Mojito, and Margarita, vanished. They did not fly. They simply deleted the space between themselves and their targets. Goku moved. For 5,000 years, Goku had fought nothing but the crushing pressure of a collapsing dimension. He had fought boredom, madness, and the physics of a void that wanted to digest him. Compared to that, an angel's speed was almost quaint. Mojito's staff swept toward Goku's neck, moving at a speed that transcended time. Goku didn't dodge. He caught the staff. The shockwave cracked the catch-in floor of the arena into dust. Mojito's eyes widened, his calm facade shattering. No mortal caught an angel's staff. It was a rule of the cosmos. "You fight with technique," Goku rumbled, his voice sounding like 2 tectonic plates grinding together. His grip on the staff tightened, and the divine metal groaned. "I fight with gravity." Goku twisted his hips and threw Mojito, not just the angel, but the momentum of the angel. Mojito was launched across the arena, crashing through a floating pillar of rock. Before Goku could breathe, Cuss and Corn were upon him, but Vados was there. She moved not like an angel, but like a storm. Her staff was a blur of violet light, parrying, striking, and deflecting her siblings with a ferocity they had never seen. Angels fight with detachment, Vados fought with love. And love, it turned out, was a heavier fuel than duty. "Stand down!" Vados cried out, slamming the butt of her staff into the ground, creating a barrier of light that shielded Goku's blind spot. "He is my son. He is my blood. The laws of the palace do not apply to him. There is no blood in angels, sister," Corn stated coldly, hovering above her. "Only code, and your code is corrupted." He raised his hand. A halo of destruction energy, pure Hakai, refined to an angelic degree, formed above Vados. It was an execution sentence. "Mother." The word was spoken softly, but it cut through the chaos like a razor. Sorrel had not moved since the battle began. He hung in the air, his arms at his sides, watching the violence with his mismatched eyes. But when the Hakai energy threatened Vados, Sorrel looked up. He didn't fire a blast. He simply looked at the energy. Unmake. The Hakai sphere above Vados didn't explode. It unraveled. The purple energy turned into harmless petals of light, drifting down like snow. Corn froze. The Grand Priest, hovering high above, felt a chill that he hadn't felt since the era before time began. "He reversed the entropy," the Grand Priest whispered. "He didn't destroy the energy. He convinced it that it never existed." Sorrel began to ascend. He floated past Goku, past Vados, rising toward the Grand Priest. The other angels tried to intercept him. Margarita threw a lance of divine light at his back. Sorrel didn't turn around. His white tail flicked, swatting the lance away as if it were a troublesome fly. The lance shattered into sparks. "Grand Priest," Sorrel said, his voice level with the floating deity, "you call us an abomination. You call my existence a mistake, but look at you." Sorrel gestured to the angels attacking his parents. "You are stagnant. You are perfect, static statues. And statues crumble when the earth moves." The Grand Priest's eyes narrowed into slits of blue fire. "You speak of movement, child? I am the axis upon which the multiverse turns. Without me, there is chaos." "Then let there be chaos," Sorrel said. The Grand Priest vanished. He reappeared instantly in front of Sorrel, his palm extended, glowing with a light that was brighter than 1,000,000,000,000 supernovas. This was not a technique. This was the raw authority of the Dai Shinkan. He placed his palm on Sorrel's chest. Seal. The universe went white. Part 2. The God Who Was Not Written. The explosion of light should have erased the galaxy. It should have reset the timeline. When the light faded, the Grand Priest stood with his hand on Sorrel's chest. He was breathing hard, his halo flickering. Sorrel hadn't moved. He hadn't blinked. There was no burn mark on his tunic. There was no damage. Sorrel looked down at the Grand Priest's hand, then up at his face. A look of genuine pity crossed the boy's features. "You tried to delete me," Sorrel whispered. "But you can't delete a file that isn't on your hard drive." The Grand Priest stepped back, his face twisting into genuine horror. What are you?" "I am the accumulation of 5,000 years of silence," Sorrel said. "I am the evolution." "Enough." The voice was high-pitched, childlike, and absolutely terrifying. The space above the arena tore open. 2 small, colorful figures floated down, sitting on a floating throne. The Omni-Kings, the Zenos. The fighting below stopped instantly. Goku and Vados landed, breathing heavily, looking up. The angels bowed their heads in terror. "It is noisy," the future Zeno said. "Very noisy," the present Zeno agreed. "And messy." They looked at Sorrel. They looked at the Grand Priest. "Dai Shinkan," present Zeno said. "Is this the glitch?" "Yes, Your Majesty." The Grand Priest bowed low, though he was still trembling. "This entity violates the core laws of existence. He threatens the balance." "Nay," future Zeno tilted his head. "Then we should squish him." "Yes," present Zeno raised his hand. "Squish," Goku screamed. "No," trying to launch himself into the sky, but Vados held him back, tears streaming down her face. "You cannot stop that, Goku. That is the end." The 2 Zenos charged their hands with the white light of erasure. It was the power that had wiped out 6 universes in an instant. It was the ultimate period at the end of the sentence. "Bye-bye," both Zenos chirped. They clenched their fists. The universe didn't end. Sorrel stood in the air. The erasure energy washed over him like a gentle breeze. It pulled at his clothes, it ruffled his hair, but it did not unmake him. The Zenos blinked. They looked at their hands. They looked at each other. "Did you squish?" "I squished." "Did you squish?" "I squished." They looked at Sorrel. He was still there. For the first time in the history of the Dragon Ball multiverse, the Zenos looked confused. They were like children who had pushed a button on a toy, and the toy refused to light up. Sorrel floated closer to the throne. The Grand Priest moved to block him, but Sorrel simply waved his hand, and the Grand Priest was pushed aside by a wall of gravity so dense it warped the light around him. Sorrel stopped in front of the Zenos. He was a giant compared to them. "You push the button," Sorrel said softly, "and the things go away. That is all you know." He reached out. The guards tried to move, but they were frozen in time. Sorrel placed his index finger on the forehead of the present Zeno. "But I am not a thing," Sorrel said. "I am a consequence." He let his energy flare just for a microsecond. The void turned gold, then gray, then white. For that split second, everyone in the arena, Goku, Vados, the angels, the Grand Priest, felt the true depth of Sorrel's power. It wasn't just ki, it was a rewrite of reality. It was a power that said, I exist so loudly that the rest of the universe had to move to accommodate it. The Xenos trembled. For the first time, they felt small. Sorrel withdrew his hand. The pressure vanished. I do not want your chair, Sorrel said, turning his back on the Omni-Kings. It is too small for me. He descended, landing softly on the arena floor between his parents. Goku looked at him, his mouth agape. Vados was sobbing silently, clutching her staff. The Grand Priest floated down, looking defeated, stripped of his absolute certainty. Why? The Grand Priest asked. You could have erased them. You could have erased me. Because my father taught me that power is for protection, not erasure, Sorrel said, looking at Goku. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. And my mother taught me that order has its place. Sorrel looked up at the sky, at the stars of the world of void. We are leaving, Sorrel declared. We will go to the universes. We will live. We will learn. And you will not watch us. You will not track us. If you try to close a door on us again, Sorrel's golden eye flashed. I will break the wall. He turned to Goku and Vados. Shall we go home? I want to see this Earth you told me about. Goku laughed. It was a rough, broken sound, but it was full of joy. He wrapped one arm around Vados and the other around his son, the son who had outgrown the gods. Yeah, Goku said, tears finally spilling over. Let's go home. I'm hungry. Vados wiped her eyes, her composure returning, though her smile was genuine and warm. I believe, Son Goku, that for the first time in 5,000 years, I can cook something that isn't made of energy. Without asking for permission, without a flash of the Grand Priest's staff, Sorrel raised his hand. He swiped down. Reality unzipped. A portal to Universe 7 opened, revealing the blue marble of Earth in the distance. The three of them walked through. Behind them, the Grand Priest and the Xenos watched in silence. The hierarchy had not been destroyed, but it had been humbled. The lock was broken. The bird had flown. And the story of the Saiyan, the angel, and the starless child was only just beginning.